Welcome to the Year of the Movie podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from the year of the movie 2023. I'm Sebastian.
I'm Maggie.
And welcome to our podcast.
Yep.
Before we begin, if you want to go ahead and support us, if you want to support us, check us out on Patreon. We got some stuff there. It's going to be exclusive content, some bonus content there. Going to have some bonus episodes of this, some bonus episodes of other stuff. Yeah, and if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever other podcast service, leave us a nice rating. It helps us with the algorithm. Yeah. Today's episode, we're talking about 2023's hit film. It struck the nation by storm.
It struck.
Old Dads.
Yeah.
Everyone's favorite. Sorry, I kicked you. For our video viewers, we don't have Bryce today, so we're just sticking on this one camera.
He's a busy boy this week.
He's very busy. It's the week of Halloween. Upcoming.
It's the 25th.
It is the 25th. Is an easy way that I could have said that.
Nah.
I'm a little all over the place right now because we tried to start this and then I left the door open.
And it's gone downhill ever since.
Why though did we start this podcast?
We started this podcast because 2023 is a goofy year for movies. Strikes happened / are happening. Then other movies just came out unrelated to that. Legally obligated to mention our sponsor 65, Cocaine Bear. Other notable ones, like the Barbie movie, an Aquaman is coming out, an Indiana Jones came out this year, a Mission Impossible came out this year, a Power Rangers came out this year, like big franchise things, and also dumb money and a bunch of other stuff. Also, like Five Nights at Freddy's and Iron Lung might be coming out this year, which is a thing we should talk about at some point. Yeah. So, a lot of stuff. This is one of the stuffs. This is Old Dads.
This is Old Dads. The synopsis of Old Dads, if you don't know, which I'm sure you already do, is three best friends become fathers later in life and find themselves battling preschool principals, millennial CEOs, and anything created after 1987.
What were your first impressions when you heard about this movie? And unrelated, what do you think about Bill Burr? We should ask that every episode.
Yeah, every episode. My first impressions when I heard about this movie was interesting because this is Bill Burr's directorial debut. So I was intrigued because unrelated, I do enjoy Bill Burr, but his more recent things.
Yeah.
He has gotten less angry, and he's done many interviews where he's like, I don't think I've gotten less angry.
Yeah.
But it's just apparent that he has. And he's done more dramatic roles. A big one, at least for me, just because I watched Star Wars, is he shows up in The Mandalorian as like a pretty interesting character. But he showed up in Reservation Dogs as a character.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
And just like other little things that's just like, oh, it's Bill Burr like doing like he was in King of Staten Island.
Yeah
No, like that was
his other big one. I think
was really good. And so like I was like, okay, this could be interesting. Like I know he is a dad, like a recent dad in real life, so like I could see this working.
Yeah. I think he has two kids. In the movie, his semi-autobiographical character has his first kid when he's 46. I think in real life it was closer to like 49 and 52 when he had his kids, but obviously something he's experienced in real life. My only impressions about this movie came from you talking about it. Otherwise I wouldn't have heard about it, and like we've mentioned the Commonwealth Sanctuary, and like it's a comedy club, and this is where we record our podcast and stuff. So like I'm familiar with like stand-up in general. I've never been as big of a fan as like you are. So I knew who he was. I just haven't super interacted with any of his work.
Yeah, I mean, you're not the target audience. Bill Burr is...
I'm shocked.
Bill Burr is a comedian who just says offensive things to be offensive.
Yeah.
He's steered away from that more recently, I feel like. Like, he's still offensive, but it's not like as bad. He is also, grown as a person and
Yeah.
learned things and whatnot.
I think when he, at least from the stuff that I have read about him, when he first started out, then it was offensive for the sake of being offensive, but then, or like that's the first thing that he gained popularity from. And then now it's kind of like offensive to like push buttons and be like, but why is that offensive? And like to get people thinking about stuff. And I do like that as a concept.
Yeah.
This movie is different from that.
A little bit. As always, before we talk about the movie, we talk about the trailer, and we talk about the trailer for a few reasons. One of the reasons is we can't legally show the trailer. Also, it wouldn't be very fun for the audio viewers, I guess.
To just hear.
Especially if it was like a montage trailer. It's just music. You're like, all right, okay, that'll be his good song, I guess. Also, if you haven't checked out the movie, you don't know about the movie, then the trailer is a good little brief explanation to see if you are interested in the movie. And there's also not much to talk about in ways of non-spoilers, so if you don't want spoiled, then you can listen to this part, and then we'll let you know when we're getting into spoiler territory, and then you can
come on back.
You can pause, watch it, and come back.
Yeah. Do you know whose turn it is?
I want to say it's my turn.
Okay. This is the official trailer that's on Netflix's YouTube, and like we're kind of joking about whether or not you've actually heard about this movie, but it does currently have 5.9 million views, and it was posted a month ago. Yeah. So
we should also say that we have a job that we watch movies before they are released publicly, and so we saw this in theaters. And our views on this movie don't reflect the company that we work for.
We're not paid for them. I'm not even gonna say what it is. But yeah, personal opinions don't reflect that of my employer. Please don't sue me. Thank you. God bless.
Rest in peace. So now on to the trailer. Upbeat music plays with a man, Jack, who's played by Bill Burr, voiceover saying, "I always wanted to be a dad."
It's Willem Dafoe again.
It just took me 46. Yeah, every guy's Willem Dafoe. This movie would have been better if it had Willem Dafoe.
Ooh, and Bill Burr inside
playing a 51-year-old. I always wanted to be a dad. It just took me 46 years to get there. We see Jack throwing a baseball to his young son and kids running around screaming at a backyard party. Jack's son is on the ground with a scrape on his elbow, and Jack tells him just rub some dirt on it. As his son does, another younger dad walks up and tells Jack, "You might want to put some Neosporin on that. It could get infected." And Jack says, "Oh yeah? Are you a doctor, or are you just like one of those WebMD guys?" The other dad responds with a smile, "It's just common knowledge. You want to keep the cut clean." Jack says, "Well, listen, I'm trying to raise a little man here, not a effing pea." I'm not going to say the swears because we're so early on in this episode. I don't want to get demonetized in any way.
You can fill in the blanks. Not a freaking pal.
There's a beat as the music stops and the other dad's smile fades. Jack continues, "So why don't you go on Twitter and share the story where you're the hero?" The other dad walks away and the Netflix logo comes up. Then we see Jack and his two friends, Mike and Connor, walking into their office saying, "What's up, party people?" And we see Connor talking to a young woman asking, "You check out that new joint from Lil Baby? Come on, pound it out," asking her for a fist bump. She smiles but just says, "That's okay, thanks." Connor says, "What? He's Fleek, Fleekity Fleek," and smiles. A full screen graphic. Work is changing. Briefly appears. Then we see their now updated office space as Mike says, "All right, you two, lock it down. We gotta impress this dude." And we see their new young boss, Aspen, who tells them in a meeting, "Change happens faster than when you were young. This company is now a gender-neutral, carbon-neutral, 21st century lifestyle brand." There's another beat, and then a clip of Jack saying, "I don't know what any of that means." Another full-screen graphic that says society is evolving, and then we hear a woman, Leah, tell Jack, "You need to talk to someone about your anger." There's then a brief series of clips showing Jack picking his son up from school, where another woman, Dr. L, tells...
Dr. Lois Schmeckel-Turner.
Yeah.
Which I do like that they say her full name every single time.
Tells Jack, You were late. He says, I couldn't find a parking spot. And she says, we don't accept excuses. Jack walks up to her asking, is there a problem here, miss? And she responds in front of other parents, well, if you had actually read the school guidebook, then I wouldn't have to tell you anything. We see Jack now yelling at her saying, I read the guidebook, all right, you stumpy little C. And then
he doesn't say it. It cuts out before he says it.
Okay, sorry. You stumpy little, and then it cuts out. Spoiler for the movie.
Yeah.
He says the C word.
Uh-huh.
Which, disclosure,
Corn.
I'm a big fan of corn. We see Jack now yelling at her saying, I read the guidebook, all right, you stumpy little. And then a gasp sound effect and everyone looking at Jack. One of the dads just says a shocked, wow. Full screen graphic, they're doing their best. Before a shot of a car driving down a road in the middle of a desert. We see Mike ask a guy in the car, Travis, you feel that your generation is more evolved? And Travis says, yeah, absolutely. We then get a clip of the guys on rideshare scooters unable to work. What?
Unable to make them work. I phrased that weird.
Unable to make them work and yelling at each other to hit the thing. Connor tells Mike, come on, let's go on the scooter. And Mike says, you know I got a flip phone. Connor says, are you kidding me? And Jack drives away. It then cuts to Jack on stage in front of a cheering crowd. Then his voiceover, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Then a child screaming and throwing a stick. Then shots of Jack hugging his son and the voiceover saying, but I'd do anything for my kid. There are shots of Jack and Connor working out, all of them on scooters together and walking through a casino in slow motion. We see Connor talking to Aspen, telling him, you have no idea how awesome I was at your age. Julio Iglesias came up to me in an airport, dead certain that I was his son Enrique. That's the kind of vibe I was putting out, bro. A slightly confused Aspen responds, that's ridiculous. There's another beat as the music cuts out again and Connor turns to look at him before saying, I was ridiculous. The title card for Old Dad comes up for several seconds before cutting back to the dad who said wow earlier, asking, is there a reason we always have two white men dominating the discussion in this room? Jack turns to Connor and asks, that's not a white guy? And Connor says, I'm confused, before the Netflix release date comes on screen.
So some quick thoughts.
Uh-huh.
This is either for you or not for you pretty immediately.
Yeah.
There's no... if you watch the trailer before you see the movie, there should be zero surprises about what it's going to be about.
Which I didn't. All I knew about this movie was it was Bill Burr's directorial debut.
At least tonally.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be any surprises about what this movie is about. It doesn't lay out a clear sequence of plot in terms of like sequencing of events. You get the general tone of like they're older dads. That's in the title. A new guy who is younger than them has taken over their business, and then also school is weird.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Yep.
And it was, I also didn't watch the trailer until after I watched the movie. And it was a lot more vibes based than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
But once you know about the movie, then that's also like not, I shouldn't have been surprised about that. And we can get into why in a second.
Yeah.
The other thing, just like an editing note, was I knew that like when they're on the scooters, I knew what they were talking about of like trying to get them to work, because a lot of times you have an app that's associated with the scooters in order to like turn them on.
Yeah.
But when Connor or Mike just says, you know, I've got a flip phone, like it feels totally out of context for them trying to make these things work. It just, yeah, I don't know. Nothing else super stood out to me from
It's fair.
the trailer.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, again, clear I'm not the target audience. Yeah.
The cast.
The cast.
So many character actors show up in this movie that are like so unexpected.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that like the woman who isn't Flo from the Progressive commercials, the guy who says like white men dominating the conversation. I do like his line read.
Yeah, he's in
white men.
Silicon Valley as Big Head. I don't remember the actor's name.
A bunch of other people that you're just like, I recognize that face. Is there someone at the door?
There is someone here for sure. It's
Yeah.
probably someone else who works in the building.
Hello. Yep, there's your dad. Okay.
Cast.
Bill Burr
Yep.
as the main character, Jack Kelly. Bobby Cannavale, is that how you pronounce his name?
Mm-hmm.
As Connor Brody. Bokeem Woodbine as Mike Richards. Those are his two buddies. Katie Asselton as Leah Kelly. That's Jack's wife. Rain Edwards as Brittany, who is Mike's younger girlfriend. Jackie Tohn, Tohn, as Kara Brody, it's Connor's wife. Miles Robbins as Aspen Bell, who is the new CEO that takes over. Rachel Harris as Dr. Lois Schmeckel Turner, who is like the school superintendent. I forget what like touchy-feely term they use for her. I think they say that of like, I'm not a principal. I'm a buddy. Yeah.
I don't know, something stupid like
Yeah. Justin Miles as Travis Ramin. He is a co-worker that's in the car with them. And then C. Thomas Howell as Ed Cameron, who I don't even know how to describe Ed Cameron.
There's not a good way to describe.
Okay, so...
I mean, we can talk about it in a bit once
Yeah.
we get more into the movie, I think.
It's a cameo role, basically.
But also... in a really small role for like a minute maybe, Paul Walter Hauser shows up as a motel manager. If you're not familiar with him, he is, someone who is kind of blowing up more recently. He was in the Blackbird miniseries on Apple TV Plus.
Oh yeah.
He is in a I Think You Should Leave sketch where he's like, I shouldn't have said that about my wife.
It's a very good sketch.
He's in Cobra Kai as someone. What's Stingray? He plays a character named Stingray. Like he's just like a really weird dude.
Yeah.
The big thing recently though is that there is a rumor that he is the lead in Tarantino's final film.
Oh.
And he shows up in this movie very briefly.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
in one of my personal least favorite scenes.
Yeah. I feel like maybe they filmed this movie before he blew up and he just like booked a small gig, or maybe he just wanted to work with Bill Burr. I don't know.
Let me see.
It was very strange.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at when principal photography took place. Some early 2022.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. It's not like he's too big for this role.
I think he might be.
He's definitely on the upswing.
Because he's also in the second season of After Party.
Oh yeah.
And like that is a like he's in every episode.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought he was a little too big for it.
That's fair.
But
yeah. So this is probably spoiler territory now.
Yes.
Because I want to give a general plot overview.
Yes.
Because there isn't one.
Yeah, not really. Also, we're spoiling now.
Yeah.
This wasn't maybe our favorite movie, and
So-
we're gonna talk about that a lot more. But
Yeah.
Also, we don't want this to be a super long episode, so we probably won't go into like the deepest dive that we have in the past.
I'm gonna try not to, or at least if I'm complaining about it, then keep it like lighthearted, because I really don't care about this movie.
Yeah.
For the amount of things that I'm like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
I
do think this was the first movie that we watched for the podcast that we watched for the podcast.
Oh yeah.
Like all of the other movies I was like somewhat interested in.
Yeah.
This one I probably wouldn't have ever watched it, even though I was like, oh, Real Bird directing, that's interesting. I probably wouldn't have watched it.
It probably would have been on the like to watch list, like kind of always.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, employer opinions or my opinions do not reflect that of my employer, blah blah blah. So just some context for us watching this movie was like we were doing this screening thing. It's open to the public. It was very chaotic. It was like
we got there first. We had not worked one of this specific types of screenings before.
So it was two people who like don't exactly are sort of in positions of authority but don't know what they're doing, trying to wrangle a crowd.
Yeah.
Like just people were watching this movie in a theater before it came out on Netflix is basically the thing, and we were in charge of getting them into that theater. So we got it all figured out. Everyone got to see it. That showed up, all that good stuff. But I was still like vaguely stressed the entire time. And then you had to sit outside of the theater to keep checking people in. So you didn't even watch
I watched
it like
it this morning on Netflix.
Yeah, so I watched it in the theater, and I just like sat down to watch it. The opening like 5 minutes are going on, and I was like, I don't think this was worth the stress to get people here.
Yeah, the opening sequence before they get to the title in this movie is maybe some of my least favorite movie I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because it's just so negative.
Yeah, it's
and lazy.
It's bitter.
Which is Bill Burr. That is Bill Burr.
Yeah.
And I understand that.
Yeah.
But in movie format, it doesn't
work.
It does not work.
Yeah. So plot overview. Jack is an older dad. He's expecting his second kid with his wife. It starts out, they're at that backyard party. They're just vibing. Like, he's got some rough interactions with other dads who are younger than him, obviously. But in general, it's like these three best buds have got it all figured out, and like they're trying their best. So they sold their company that was making, like, the three of them started it together. They had this company that makes vintage or like vintage looking jerseys and other
throwback jerseys.
Yeah. So they're like vintage stuff. They sell it. They stay on as employees, and then Aspen comes in as their new CEO, who changes a bunch of stuff, and it's basically a completely different company. That's why he says the thing in the trailer of being like gender neutral, carbon neutral lifestyle brand. And at this point, I was like, nostalgia and vintage are so popular. Why would you change that? Why aren't you leaning into it? Why is it changing completely? Yeah,
they chose something that, like, it doesn't make sense for it to be changed. Like, why? Like, Aspen, pick a different brand.
Yeah, Aspen says, like, I've worked at 12 startups, or like some
15.
Yeah, some
he's
ridiculous
28.
Some high number, and he's like bragging about it, and they're like, are you sure that's something you want to brag about? But it's still like, he's worked at all of these companies, and he doesn't know like what target audience he wants, or like what the strengths already are in the brand. Whatever. That's reading too much into this. Jack is late picking up his son. He calls the principal a bad word. He has to apologize to the whole school, and then also planned a fundraising event to like make up for it. It isn't subtle about implying that like PC school structure only really does this stuff for money and free labor and to guilt people into doing stuff for them.
Yeah, I'm gonna spoil this right now. The principal, who's like the enemy in this movie, who like does suck. Her character sucks. She's really annoying. I get it. But it ends with one of those scenes at the end of the movie where they do like,
where are they now?
Where are they now?
Yeah.
Yeah. She got arrested for
money laundering.
Money laundering from the school.
Yeah.
And it was just like one of those things that's just like, why?
Yeah.
Like there's a script that I read that you have also read at this point from someone that we went to school with. Neither of us know this person, but it ends with a couple getting back together.
Oh,
and someone was like, but what about the girl you have been seeing? And he's like, she flunked out of school. And it's just like, why?
Yeah.
It's just like, why do you need...
You didn't need to tie up that particular loose end.
Yeah, and this was one of those, like, it's just like, okay, this is weird.
I was just listening to a Bechtelcast episode about Showgirls, and in that they were saying, like, whether you wanted to or not, that movie will, like, close all of the loops of the plot and, like resolve everything. And I feel like this movie tries to do the same thing, where it has Dr. Lois Schmeckel-Turner gets arrested, and then what's his name, Ed Cameron, who the Aspen has chosen to become an influencer, or an anti-influencer, whatever. I don't want to get into it. They're like, and also Ed Cameron came out and married his husband.
Yeah.
It's just
because like the one scene that we really get with this character is he is a hermit. He went off
by choice.
He went off the grid in the 80s, and he's been living alone in a desert.
Mm-hmm.
They find him somehow,
Mm-hmm.
and then when they find him in the desert, he asks them if they're a bunch of F-slurs.
Yeah.
That's the context for the wrap-up at the end saying he came out.
Yeah.
So he was only using that word because he was deeply closeted.
Yeah. To the point of, like, needing to exile himself from society.
Yeah. The actor who plays him,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if he's just friends with Bill Burr. He's too big for that role.
I agree. He, like, I did not... Like, the guy's got a big beard, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But to the point that I, like, did not recognize that's who it was until I looked up IMDb cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, it's C. Thomas Howell. Anyway, Mike's girlfriend gets pregnant. So Mike is, like, the most stable of the guys so far when they're all introduced.
Yeah. His two kids are off in college now.
They're already grown up. He, like, at that party, he points to it, like, someone asked him, like, what do you know about parenting or something like that. He points to his two kids and he's like, Harvard, Yale. And then he points to across the pool and he's like, that's my girlfriend who is talking to her friend, my ex-wife. Like, he's got it all figured out or whatever. They make it clear that he and Brittany are on the same page of, like, they don't want any more kids. They're cool with where their relationship is at, all that good stuff. Brittany gets pregnant. And then that, like, Mike is barely holding it together basically the entire time after that of, like, coming to terms with his life isn't going to be what he thought it was going to be now.
Yeah.
But all of it is internal and he does not vocalize any of it ever. You just, like, are supposed to read it from his face, which you can in some parts, but also let him say it.
But I think that's, like, men don't share their feelings.
Exactly, and
like,
this movie could have talked about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guys all get fired for locker room talk in a rental car with Travis when they're trying to find Ed Cameron.
Yeah, so, like, it's bad locker room talk. Like, it is.
It's dead naming Caitlyn Jenner locker room talk.
It's incredibly offensive.
Yeah.
But they get caught because the rental car has a camera inside that then Aspen uses that footage to be like, we can have this.
Yeah, this goes against our brand values.
Yeah, and then...
Which I was like, the privacy stuff, obviously an issue, and that's, like, what the movie wants you to focus on, but I was also like, the content kind of balances out.
But then Travis, who is, like, a younger dude who got hired onto the company by Aspen, also gets fired, and then Travis is like, why? I
didn't say anything in the car.
I wasn't condoning their behavior. Like, I was very much against it, which, like, in the scene that we see, that's true.
Yeah.
And then Aspen was like, well, and he hits, like, a little button, and another clip plays, and it's Travis in his own home.
Yeah.
Singing along with rap music, and he's saying the N-word several times, singing along with the song. Which
is a whole discussion that they have in the rental car of, like, Mike saying, like, you think your generation is much more evolved than ours. And then he's like, when you listen to like NWA, do you stop? He keeps saying, like, do you stop your flow? What do you say when that word comes up? And then Travis is like, I would never say it. They start playing the song in the car as like come on, like, let's jam to this. And then Travis is rapping along, and then he's about to say it, and he looks at Mike and he goes, no.
And, like, that scene, I did like that scene. I thought they were close to getting somewhere. It didn't quite hit it.
Yeah.
And then they show that, like, Travis does say it, but he gets fired for a recording that they stole, basically.
Yeah.
From his own home, and, like,
the movie almost does stuff with, like privacy concerns.
Yeah, but it's such, like, it's there just to move this.
They're trying to say something about we live in a surveillance state society.
Yes.
But then instead it just, like, Travis is fired, and then he's never get a where are they now for Travis. He's like, but you get one for Ed? Sure. Yeah, the boys are no longer friends because they all get fired and have to, like, do different stuff. Jack's wife is mad about what he said in the car, and, like, they were kind of united, like, when he said this stuff to the principal, and she was like, I get where you're coming from, you gotta play nice.
Yep.
This, she's like, come on, man, like, we just went through this. And then Connor, or Leah and Kara, are fighting about parenting styles
for a valid reason, because Kara,
very valid
Kara
reason.
is like, she needs so much help.
Don't worry, I have a separate bullet point. We will
Okay.
get there. But basically, Connor isn't allowed to talk to Jack anymore because his wife said so. And there is a kind of funny scene where he's writing like basically a war letter.
Yeah, it's
to
a
Jack,
war love letter.
where he's like, it has been so long since I have seen
And it has
you.
like slow piano.
Yeah. That is, I think, my favorite part of the movie is
I
like
like that
sequence.
until he gets caught.
Until he gets caught, then it sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, time passes, the guys reconnect, Jack yells at his wife in public, and they separate for a bit. He yells at his wife at the fundraising event, when he accidentally ends up overbidding for like 2 hours of time with Dr. Lois Schmeckel-Turner, and then she's like, what the hell, we don't have $3,000, you just lost your job. And he's like, what did you expect me to do? I'm trying to like do all the stuff that you want me to do, of like play nice. I put this thing on. Would I put this event on if I was a bad guy? Like, he's like,
well, so she wasn't upset that he spent.
That's right. She wasn't upset about the money.
Yeah, no. So what happened was he accidentally outbid everyone else.
Yeah.
Dr. L walked up to him and said something corny.
She said she's still like negging him basically, of
Yeah.
like, I like whatever you do is not going to be enough. And then he like tries to call her out on it, of like,
He was just like, just stop.
yeah.
Like, you don't need to do this.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly think that in that moment he was being the adult, because he was just like, I get it. You don't like me, that's fine. You can just stop.
He was being the adult until he said, you can drop the act.
Yes.
Like, implying that we're all like, no one is really like trying to be nice to people or whatever, which like, she sucks, but that's still like her mission statement, I guess. I don't know. It's complicated, but anyway, it results in Jack yelling at Leah in public, and then that sucks. So they separate, and he's living at a motel. There's a strip club scene. They meet Aspen at a casino.
Yeah, there's a strip club, and it's, you don't really ever need a strip club. There are funny things that do happen in this scene. Mike gets super drunk, and he starts dancing with some strippers. And the only thing that I find funny about this is when he goes, "I'm hella Mike. This is what I like.
Yeah.
I'm hella Mike. This is what
he's
I like."
like fully
And, like,
broken.
But they cut to that scene where he's just doing that,
Yeah.
and they cut away.
Yeah.
That is all the context.
Yeah.
Like, thought that was funny, but I
yeah.
don't like why this.
They basically like, everything is going wrong for all of them, or like Jack and Mike end up eating alone together at a diner. So then that's basically their like reconnection scene, and then the next thing you get is Mike and Jack in a car together, and then Connor pops up because he just did coke in the back seat.
Yeah.
Apparently he's got a coke issue. And they're like, we're on our way to Vegas, like we're gonna reclaim our youth. Like Brittany,
But they don't go to Vegas.
they don't like, yeah, they can't make it to Vegas because they're like, their legs are cramping up from driving for so long and stuff. Like Mike, he is about to get engaged to Brittany basically, or like she says she wants to get married for the baby, so that it's just like
shuts down.
he's like, they're getting ready for like a baby shower or something, and she's like, I want to get married not just for the baby but for like our relationship. And he's like, okay, like you can, like, there was tense music right before he said that or something, and then he walks out and she's like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm gonna go register to vote. He's just out of it. So then it's like, I kind of liked the implications of like, they're trying to go to Vegas but then they can't make it anymore, so they go to a different place. And then Aspen is there because he also got fired for not being politically correct.
They made a shirt that said "spirit animal."
They said Ed Cameron is my spirit animal, and then he was like, did you guys know you can't say that anymore? And they just laugh at him. So yeah, hijinks ensue, I guess. Leah gives birth, or like she's in labor and they're calling Jack to like try and get him to go back to the hospital. None of them can drive because they're all drunk.
So they call an Uber or something, and it is the oldest man alive.
Yeah.
And he is the crankiest, most angry, most offensive man alive.
Yeah.
And he says something about rideshare scooters that Bill Burr said at the beginning of the movie, and then that's when Bill Burr is like, oh my god, I need to change or else I'm going to be this lonely old man who drives Uber.
So they're stuck in traffic, so he gets out, and that's when they see the scooters, and they ride the scooters to the hospital. He misses the birth.
Yep.
He realizes he's old. He decides to go to therapy, and then everything is just good after that. Like, there are some conversations between Mike and Connor and their respective partners. And then, like, the final scene is a mirror of him at the beginning throwing a baseball with his son.
But now he has his baby daughter in a papoose.
Yeah, like a Baby Bjorn situation.
Yeah, strapped to the front of him.
Yeah.
And he's playing catch.
Mm-hmm.
And someone, like, dude on his bike, who is also a comedian. He's very funny. I can't remember his name. He shows up in lots of things. He was in Superstore as a reoccurring character. He shows up and he's like, oh, hey, man, you know, you may not want to play catch with your daughter there. Do you really think that's a good idea? And Bill Burr just, like, stares at him for a second, and, like, there's voiceover or something. He's like, I've changed, you know, I've become a better person. And Bill Burr, like, you can see, like, he's getting angry, but then he just says, oh, you're right, man, I didn't think about that. And the biker just goes, yeah, okay, and bikes away. And then Bill Burr to himself just goes, asshole, and then keeps playing catch with his son and his daughter strapped to his chest.
It's implied that because he rode a scooter and, like, mumbled under his breath that he is meeting the new generation halfway.
He got on the scooters and he was like, whoa, these things are really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the stakes of the movie seem so low to me.
Yeah, the whole thing about the movie is that his 5-year-old needs a good recommendation from Dr. L
well, that's
to get
how
into
it starts.
kindergarten.
Yeah.
And, like, that is the underlying, like, it's
it
there all the
up.
way through, because then at the end it's like, well, my son's in public school now, which is, like, they had a conversation about how that was a terrible idea.
Yeah, they say, like, that school wasn't so bad, and then she's like, you said that school was bad, and then, like, they don't specify what about any of it was bad. So the plot I said this earlier after you watched it. Was, let's continue this fun little comparison we keep making with movies, is if Knock at the Cabin is edging you and Bottoms is finishing you, then Old Dads is suffering from erectile dysfunction of just, like,
which is just perfect. That Old Dads.
Yeah. It's like they did it on purpose.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Billy Burry.
Where this movie starts things or, like, tries to go in a direction of something, and then it just, like, can't.
It fizzles out.
It can't maintain the momentum.
And I swear this never happens.
So yeah, his son's kindergarten recommendation letter or the fundraiser happening, like, to me, in any other movie that would have been, like, the big, like, climactic event, and they just happen in this movie. He learns to appreciate the scooters, and that's, like, his turning point. Mike is almost having a breakdown the entire time. We never see him, like, verbalize anything that he's actually feeling. And then he just kind of simmers out at the hospital, and he meets Brittany there, and he's like, I'm sorry, you want to get married? And she's like, don't propose to me in the hospital. You have to take me to a nice restaurant first. And then they almost go to Vegas, and then that's the most acknowledgement that they have of the realities of aging. And then it ends with him saying he scheduled a therapy session. I would have liked to see an actual therapy session in this movie.
Bill Burr would never do that. There's just no way Bill Burr would ever share his private therapy session.
Probably not. But yeah. So kind of related to that, to me, there were several times that the plot went in a different direction than what I expected. I thought this was going to be more of like a hangover movie or something like that, where it's like just
it's like they were trying to do Hangover but also a movie with a point, and
it didn't do either one of those.
It just it blurred the line too much.
Yeah.
It's just,
so there were a couple different times where I like was watching it and kind of anticipating of what I thought would come next.
Yeah.
So like we said earlier, The Business, I thought that The Business would keep the vintage feel, but Aspen would tank it because he wasn't able to do it authentically because he was born when we were. And then the guys get brought back on and take over The Business again because they actually know what they're doing. So like some acknowledgement of like, we've done this before, like throw them a bone basically of like, yeah, we're old, but we do know some stuff that you don't, or something like that. And then when Aspen takes over The Business and then saying that they need the perfect person who doesn't want to be famous and they go find Ed Campbell, I thought it was going to be Jack when he was framing that. Yeah. And he's like, that perfect person is, and then it looks at like the camera I feel like is on Jack for a second and he's like, Ed Campbell, and I want you to find him. Yeah. It's a weird subversion. And then Leah locks Jack out of the house after he yells at her in public, and then he breaks back in, and then they keep yelling at each other, and then he moves out after that. But it briefly shows like him talking to, like, he has like a Ring doorbell or something, so it shows him talking to the doorbell being like, it's me, let me in. And then he breaks down the door to get in, and he just kind of goes like, I'll fix that later. I expected him to get arrested for breaking into his own house, and then that was going to become some sort of commentary. Any one of these, it's not something that I would have loved the plot to do, but at least it would have been consistent with making some sort of point. And it isn't really. It's just kind of a guy complaining, and I wish that it was more than that.
Yeah, I think that's my big problem with this movie is that Bill Burr comes across so whiny.
Yes.
Like, he comes across as such a baby boy in this movie. Yeah. And I know that he complains a lot in his stand-up, and it's all like he's very angry and like offensive. But it just, I think, is something that is acceptable with stand-up, because when you're doing stand-up, you are making jokes about what you observe. Yeah. So a lot of that is complaining about what you observe.
You should center yourself in stand-up.
But when it's a character in a movie and we're just watching you complain the entire time,
it's not entertaining.
It's just sad.
Yeah. My kind of soapbox thing for this movie is like, I agree, our generation sucks.
Oh, yeah, no. That's something we should say. We're not fans of our generation.
We're not fans of our generation, but like, I also think asterisk to that is like, every generation sucks. Sure. And ours just is doing it in a fun, unique way.
It's different than the last one, and that's just like, that's what happens every time. Yeah. And I just don't get when people like Bill Burr don't see that. Yeah. Because it's like, there's no way he liked the generation before him. Yeah. Right?
And it shows that with him like looking at the Uber driver and being like, I don't want to be anything like you. Yeah. Like, how could you be so out of touch? Anyway, I do like, this movie isn't making a point, but what it is almost attempting to do is like say we shouldn't be as soft. Like, PC culture isn't, or like is out of control. That's not a unique statement, but that's what it's trying to do. And like, you can't say anything anymore. I just feel like in general, you should keep in mind that this isn't about you. And like, I get that when you are older, that maybe it can feel like the world is leaving you behind because of all of these changes and things that you don't recognize are becoming like mainstream. But when there are words...
That's why you have to start young. Yeah. Right? Like in high school and everyone was getting on social media, I was like, what is this? Yeah. I don't get it. Yeah. So like, if you just start young, if you start behind, you won't ever feel left out.
So like, I can almost sympathize with this. And like, I get that that's the perspective he's going to come from. especially with stand-up, like you're supposed to make your stand-up about you.
Yeah.
This is like, you can't say certain words anymore. That's like a big thing that people say, is like you can't say anything anymore. It's just like, if maybe my general thing is like, if you're not a part of that group, then I don't think you get a say in how that group would like to refer to themselves as. And like, it's just because you can't refer to people in a way that like you don't mean offense, but they don't appreciate, and you have been using that word for 20, 30, 40 years, like, it's just a respect thing, my guy. Like, it's not about you. It's about how people have, like, always seen themselves. I feel like we also, like, we've done this when we've talked about other movies that, like, we've watched that have come out in the 90s and 80s and whatever, that we've seen recently, of, like, you can't say that anymore. It's like, actually, you couldn't say that at all. It's just no one was willing to listen to those groups saying, like, please refer to me as indigenous.
Yeah.
So that's just my general thing of, like, you gotta chill out and just, like, listen to people, and that's not a new take.
What Bill Burr doesn't understand is that, like, all of the critiques that he has with people, that, like, the caricatures in this movie of just, like, you can't say that, you can't do this.
We should say that everyone in this movie is two-dimensional.
Yeah, they're just like a New York Times comic strip of a person.
Yeah.
But what he doesn't understand is, like, all of his complaints that he has with people are, like, what he's doing.
Yeah.
Like just, like, how he sees the world is very much like, I see the world this way, so it must be right.
Yeah.
Right? And what he, I think, really needs to grasp, because I know I've heard him say stuff similar, but I don't know if he applies that to himself, is that literally nothing in this world is about you.
Yeah.
Like, and that applies for everybody.
Yeah.
So, like, I just don't, why does, I just...
He does kind of poke fun of himself, too, within this movie. Like, that's the point, is him being like, he's clearly not trying to establish, like, I'm in the right the entire time. Like, he has some growth, I guess, lowercase g.
In the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, last 5 minutes of the movie. But, like, it's not, it's just, I forgot my point, and I stopped caring about it.
This was an exhausting movie.
Yeah.
Just, like, in terms of, I don't care, this is bad, it's lazy. Like, so much of the writing was lazy, and it was just, like, ranty.
Yeah.
And a movie, like, okay, so honestly, the level of quality, the writing in this movie is the same level that, like, CW or modern cable television is, but on the other side. Because I have a problem with CW with all of their just, like, forward, even when it's, like, left-leaning, stuff that I agree with.
Where it's just not nuanced.
Like, it's not nuanced. It's just like, it's okay to be gay.
Yeah.
Right? That's the
Thanks,
level.
CW.
Yeah, that's the level of of this writing in the movie. I don't know if he wrote this movie.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But, like, a lot of that stuff in this movie was just, like, the same level, just with a different thing of just, I don't like change.
Yeah. A lot of the, like, we mentioned the two-dimensional characters earlier, like, you see that especially with, like, the just conglomerate of the parents of the school. I just watching that, I was like, one, if this is truly how you see the world, that's really sad. Yeah. Two, like, this is, like, writing the Yelp review person. Like, you will always see more negative reviews or, like, just negative responses for stuff, because that's, like, easier to talk about. It gives you something to say or whatever. You're not gonna see, like, people aren't gonna go out of their way if they had, like, a fine experience at a restaurant, like, just okay. They're not gonna be like, yeah, I'm gonna tell people that this was just okay. They're either gonna tell people if it was, like, on either side of a spectrum. And I just feel like that was the same thing with the parents of, like, this truly isn't how anyone I've ever met is. I'm sure that person exists, but, like, that's not the majority. This should not be, like, your, like, version of, like, the average liberal or just the average 30-year-old. I've never met someone like this. I know we live in the Midwest, but, like, that's the other thing He's just like, this is in LA and he's in his 50s. I'm like, are you not used to this by now?
I know. The company's 23 years old, so he's at least been in LA for 23 years.
Like, you had kids in LA. What did you expect was gonna happen?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And maybe that's another thing of just like, Bill Burr has been in LA too long. Maybe he's just like...
Maybe he needs to go home.
Yeah, he should go back.
Back to where you came from.
Okay, we should talk about the wives
Yeah.
and just the relationships of the main three pairings, and how if any of these relationships went on r/am I the asshole, everyone in the comments would say get
Divorce.
a divorce.
So, Leah, whenever she talks to Jack, she never says, like, specifically, like, you can't say that anymore, or that's not, like, the goal of the conversation, like, what she's getting across to him. But the movie definitely frames her in that way of, like, being or trying to be his voice of reason.
Yeah. She's also younger. I don't know how much younger. Younger enough that at one point he goes, "This is the problem with your generation." To her.
Yeah, all of them, like Leah, Kara, and Brittany are all younger than their partners. Leah and Kara are somewhere around the same age. I assume they were in their 30s. Brittany, I'm pretty sure is like closer to our age, of somewhere in her 20s.
I assume 25 to 28.
I was just like, they showed his sons, they showed Brittany. I was like, I hope they're not in class together. And that was about it.
Yeah.
But so the movie frames her at least as saying you can't say that anymore. But what actually comes out of her mouth is you need to figure out your anger. And that's a completely different statement. And like, if you're hearing it the same way, that's deeply fascinating, and we don't have time to get into that. But like, that also to me makes the situation scarier. If she's like, my husband is an angry man and I'm worried about his interactions on a daily basis, so that's a much higher stakes situation than what the movie treats it as.
I mean, like, she tells a story that's supposed to be endearing, I guess, that is just a red flag. She's like, on our second date, he tried to beat up like 15 frat dudes, and you know what? I was into it.
I slept with him.
I liked it.
Yeah. Is that my computer? Oopsie.
No worries.
Yeah. There's one scene where Leah, Kara, and Brittany are all talking to each other, and I'm pretty sure it does not pass the Bechdel test, which shocking.
So that scene doesn't, but the movie does.
With Leah and Kara?
Yes.
Arguing?
Yes.
I thought so, but it's also, it depends on, okay, if you don't know what the Bechdel test is, just say that first. Then I know
there's
just
many different versions,
yeah,
but the base version.
I just mentioned the Bechdel cast or podcast. The version that they use when they talk about different movies is 2 lines of dialogue. They say between marginalized genders. It started out as like just between women. It's just between 2 people who are not men, basically. Whether or not the conversation is not about a man. It's about Kara's son, who is a boy.
No. So, like, part of it is, but part of it is also about being a bad mom.
That's true.
And then later they meet up again, and she apologizes, and the other one is like, "Oh, I'm over it. I thought you were over it."
Leah apologizes. Kara sucks.
Yes. So it does.
It does.
But it's talking about only, like, it's talking about, you know, the mother experience.
Yeah. It passes, like, on a technical basis if you want to use the 2 lines of dialogue. If you want to use the overall context of the scenes together, then it does not pass. Anyway, Kara, she is framed as, like, a controlling, just straight up shrew. Like, she sucks. And it never questions, the movie never questions why that dynamic came up in the first place, of, like, she's fully controlling over Connor's everyday schedule. When he finally, like, blows up at her at the end, he says, like, she's frigid, she's unfeeling, and he doesn't need every minute of his life dictated.
Well, he says, "I don't want to be in fear of you," which, like, that alone is like, you should get divorced. Yeah,
but then
and she's like, "Are you saying you want to divorce?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah. But then he also, like, a line later is like, when you open your legs, the East Germany national anthem starts playing, and and then it's just like, dude. So the movie never questions why that dynamic came up in the first place. If like Connor the entire time, it even shows it in the trailer of he's trying to relate to the youths. He's trying to be a lot younger. He's much more immature than his wife is. To me, I was like, yeah, these are both caricatures, but also like Kara probably had to pick up his slack over the years, and that's why they got to this point.
Yeah.
And Connor does not take any responsibility for that. It also does not make sense to me why she is then simultaneously the my son can do no wrong parent.
Oh, really? It makes sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me that she, like, her introduction scene is her like leaning down to the son and being like, just let your emotions out. He says that she's frigid and unfeeling, but then she's so emotionally focused with her kid. That was the weird dynamic to me.
Oh, but I don't think she's like truly emotionally connected to her. It's
she's going through the motions.
She's going through the motions of like what she should do, which is what like I think her whole character is, and like the telling the husband like what he needs to do.
She snaps at him to get him like to do stuff.
No, and like because I have unfortunately met people like her where it is like she's terrible to everyone except the kid. The character, it does make sense. It's a caricature still, but it does make sense to me. But I wanted her to get punched in the face, at least in one scene specifically, because her little son comes up to Leah, who's pregnant, and goes, "Hi, baby," and slaps.
He hits
Leah's
her stomach. So him
and Leah is like, "You cannot do that." And then Kara's like, "Do not yell at my son." And I'm just like, "You were pregnant.
Yeah.
You know."
That I know nothing about kids. I like don't know anything, don't necessarily want to, like, whatever, but I know like if anything like goes near the orbit of a pregnant person's stomach, then like you got to treat that real carefully. And like how is that not the equivalent of like a man sees another man get kicked in the nuts and you like flinch, like, and you go like, ooh, like how did Kara not see that and like not feel any empathy, or just like literal gut reaction of like, oh my god, that would be the worst thing to ever happen. Like,
and I want to about the Bechdel test thing. Back to that, I want to say, not every movie has to. There are movies where like if it's forced in,
it's awkward.
However, this movie does enough to give the moms a little bit of character that interact with each other that you're like, but it could have. For
a movie that claims to be about parenting, then the moms are just shoved to the side enough that it's an issue that it doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
And I see that you have a point about
I do.
More.
My next point before that is, why is Brittany with Mike?
That's a great question.
Anyway, so my next point is there's a CNN opinion article that I found. I think it's literally called like Why Old Dads Made Me Mad. It's by this woman who is also an older mom, and she talks about like how the original concept for the movie seemed interesting to her, but then she saw the trailer and she was just like, oh, well, this sucks. And then she makes some other interesting points.
We should say that there's a whole part because Mike gets Brittany pregnant, and Mike is like, I got a vasectomy and I'm in my 50s. This is crazy that I got a woman pregnant. And in my head I was like, Mick Jagger, cheated. De Niro. Well, or she cheated. Or she cheated. But my thought was like, just all of these recent old men who are like famously getting people pregnant.
Like vasectomies aren't 100%. Like no form of birth control is going to be 100% effective. Blah blah blah. So this article, she points out that older moms are the only demographic that's increasing in fertility rates. I forget the exact percentages that she used. But this movie doesn't really look at the pros and cons that comes with being an older parent in real life. And then there's a quote from the article that I thought was interesting where she says, she's talking about like the difference in portrayal between older moms and older dads. She's saying that's because the narrative about older moms is that we're selfish, not that we haven't found a partner, that we're trying to get out of debt to afford a child, or we have trouble getting pregnant. But older dads, no matter if they're octogenarians, are rarely called selfish or dried up. This movie does not. It completely ignores the issue of older moms by giving all of them a younger wife.
Yeah.
And they never address. She mentions in this article, like, Jack says that it took him 46 years to become a dad, and if anyone asks him why, he just says F you, basically. Yeah. It's never brought up, like, why it took him so long to find someone and to become a parent. And, like, if this movie was about older moms, then that would have been, like, the central focus of this movie, is, like, why did you wait so long?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah. I think because we're just over an hour, I think we should keep moving this along and get into production facts.
Yeah. So it was released October 20th, 2023 on Netflix. It was produced by Miramax and All Things Comedy. That's Bill Bird's production studio. I will say this is like a Netflix exclusive release. I obviously saw it in a theater. It was a very interesting experience watching it in a theater because it was a lot of older people in the audience. Everyone who came out and told us their opinions about it, like, loved the movie.
Yeah.
Or
really liked it.
Yeah. We watched the movie with the target demographic and they had a great time. And it, regardless of what I thought about the movie, it was cool to sit in a theater and have people, like, laugh and gasp and react at all the right points. And I feel like I haven't actually experienced that maybe since, like, Star Wars came out.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, like, just since COVID, I mean, we don't go to screenings with a lot of people very often. It's like we'll go to a Tuesday matinee.
Right. Anyway, this has a runtime of 1 hour and 44 minutes. It's rated R, obviously.
Yeah. Oh, man. Oh, wow.
This rating went up. So... the critics ratings, it has when I did the notes, it has a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes with an 89% audience score.
So different.
I looked at articles earlier who had the Rotten Tomatoes percentage at 19%, so, like, it's gone up a little bit as more reviews have come out. It has a 42 out of 100 on Metacritic. Yeah. So one of the nicer critic reviews that I could find was Brittany Weatherspoon from Screen Rant. Said Bill Burr's film isn't the worst directorial debut by any means of the phrase, but the film's raunchy comedy fails to say something meaningful. All the other reviews were basically just like, bitter old man, get out of here, grandpa. Yeah. Which I was like, well, this is proving his point. Let's stop.
That is a problem with this movie. Is now if people don't like it, he can just be like,
that's the point. Audience reviews from Rotten Tomatoes. One guy who gave it a 5-star review said, glad to see someone take a risk. Movies have been dumbed down to a point where they are unwatchable. Thanks, Bill, for bringing back what has made movies in the past still classics today.
God, no.
This is, again, you could say the words in the 80s, but that doesn't mean you should have.
What risk was taken? Like, I just don't...
The swearing. It's just swearing. Yeah. People hear swearing.
And talking bad about the new generation.
And yelling, and they're, like, funny. And
do you know what movie took a risk? Bottoms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was a great movie.
Yeah. Like, I don't mean to, like, dumb down people who thought this movie was great, but I just really want to be like, why?
They have a dated worldview.
Yeah. Audience reviews in general are some variation of you'll love this if you love Bill Burr, critics are out of touch with reality, and the people giving this bad reviews are just proving his point.
No, because like we said, we are people who, like, agree that, like, the generation sucks. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not,
but tale as old as time, baby.
Yeah, like it's just,
yeah. I will also say I was not offended by anything in this movie because I thought that it was just doing the boring option.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's an interesting 1-star review from The Guardian that I saw. Viewers expecting Jack to make his peace with this by finding something to appreciate in the modern world would be sorely mistaken. His growth limited to the realization that curses cause the least trouble when muttered under breath out of earshot instead of yelling into the offending party's face. That's not nothing, and yet it is very barely something, hardly enough to build a movie around. The years to come will not be kind to Jack, surrounding him with more and more reasons to feel befuddled and aggravated, testing his resolve to say nothing while he fantasizes about their slow, painful demise. And that should be workable from a comedic standpoint. When not being used to grind dull culture war axes, sputtering impotent anger is a comedy staple. It just needs to be funnier than this.
Yeah.
He's just saying he's not saying anything. And like, I also thought that of like during the final scene of him throwing the baseball with his kid and holding the other kid, and then like him just mumbling under his breath and whatever. Like, I'm sure he is like a good parent and like his kids will be provided for.
That's true.
But I also was watching that and I was like, what if one of his kids comes out as non-binary? What the hell is going to happen in 10 years?
I will say the one thing that they do really well in this movie is that they show that Bill Burr does love his kids.
Yes.
And he isn't afraid to show that in ways that his generation and older, where men aren't allowed to show. Like, he says to his 5-year-old son, I love you, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, he is very loving towards his kids.
It's in the trailer.
And that is good.
Yeah. I wish.
But why can't?
I wish this movie talked about that. And I wish it focused on, like, the toxic masculinity and, like, you know, like a big focus of Everything Everywhere All at Once was like ending generational trauma.
Yeah.
and like being like, I am sorry that I hurt you. It was not my intention. This is how I was raised. Let's work on this together kind of thing. You could totally do that with this movie of him being like, my kid is like 5 now. Yeah. He's understanding the world and like how I operate within it. I want to tell him I love him and that it's okay to do and like express your emotions and blah blah blah, and like figuring out how to do that
somewhere
when you were never taught that.
Somewhere in this movie is a good movie and it's 10 minutes long. Like, all of the stuff outside of his personal family dynamic is not important to what the interesting story could have been.
You don't have to go to Vegas for this movie.
No, you don't have to go to a strip club.
Yeah.
If this movie had been a rated R, and it can still be rated R, version of Daddy Daycare. And I'm not saying the plot of Daddy Daycare, but the story dynamic of a father realizing he needs to be there for his son, not just monetarily.
Yeah.
That's
something.
That is the movie that would have been more interesting.
Yeah. Is the computer good?
You keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like there are just several parts where like the most interesting things are like the generations interacting with each other, like when they talk to Aspen and kind of have like a heart to heart, and it's like you kind of get interactions with all of them. I don't know if you get one from Mike, but Jack and Connor at least, of them like passing on wisdom to him, and like that's an aspect of like generational interaction that is important, and trying to relate to each other. And there are just so many missed opportunities of like talking about bigger issues of like just what aging is like, what being a parent is like, instead of it just does the kids these days thing. And not even in a fun way.
I'm not going to ask if the movie was a success because it's a Netflix movie, so we're not going to know. But what was allegedly the budget?
Allegedly, it was $57 million.
That's ridiculous.
This is from like 2 unverified sites who like immediately tried to give me pop-up ads and notifications. So I don't know how accurate it is. So box office, it's a Netflix movie, so no idea. But according to one site, it became the #1 movie on Netflix within 24 hours, which I don't know, again, how verifiable that is, because it could just, like, how much do you really trust that top 10 on Netflix, and how much of it is,
Netflix
like,
pushing what it wants to.
Yeah, like, we happen to have this movie that came out on Friday, and it's #1, whatever. So, it's out there. People will watch it, I'm sure. So, it's starring and directed by and written by and produced by Bill Burr. It it was co-written by Ben Tischler. This is his first writing credit. And then they were both inspired to write the story after becoming first-time dads later in life. Why isn't that the thesis of your movie then?
So many scenes of this movie were Bill Burr doing his stand-up.
Yes.
In conversation with someone.
Yeah.
And there is a way to translate your stand-up special into a movie. And if you want a great example of that, check out
The Machine?
Well, I haven't seen that. I don't know.
I haven't seen that either, but that's the premise of that, at least.
Yeah, but I heard that it wasn't great, which we'll talk about it because
it came out this year.
But no, the one that I was going to talk about was Mike Birbiglia's Sleepwalk with Me. There's a narrative movie version of that special and that story, and it is very good, and it doesn't feel like stand-up.
Yeah.
He is never just like talking at someone ranting.
Yeah. Yeah. The one of the like co-producers that was on this movie that was in this interview from the Hollywood Reporter that I found really interesting, but in that he was saying like that was kind of the point of the movie, was like it's a narrative form of his stand-up, but I feel like you can't just copy and paste that over. No. You gotta flesh people out.
Yeah.
Anyway, more on that Hollywood Reporter interview. It gives like a general career trajectory of Bill Burr and like how he got to this point. He started as a clean comedian, which I did not realize.
Yeah.
And then it also just highlights some of his business and comedy decisions that he made that put him ahead of trends and like made him stand out. He started a podcast in 2007, which was like 2 years before Joe Rogan started his. And then his production company also began in 2012. So he's just like always been able to stay ahead of the game basically and keep himself
which is
out
so
there.
Funny because he's complaining about the game.
Yeah. And the trends, but he's doing them real good.
He's just paving the way. He's a hipster. Bill Burr is a hipster. Oh my God, Bill. Are you aware? Oh my God. This is my favorite discovery I've ever made. And I discovered unattainable.
Yeah. Anyway, a lot of the other because they interview that other guy who is a producer and then also one of his longtime collaborators, and then Bill Burr's wife and obviously Bill Burr. They talk about interesting range of topics. They talk about The Mandalorian and what's her name, who got fired from it.
Oh, Gina Carano?
Carano?
I think so.
Her.
Yeah.
And like his general opinions on it, and he was saying that she shouldn't have gotten fired just because it's a weird precedent to set of like your personal beliefs will dictate whether or not you deserve to make a living, which I get that on the face value statement.
Yeah.
When you get into specific cases, it gets a little tricky. Who would have thought? And he has this interesting quote where he's talking about like not cancel culture, but just like society. Where he says, I love the whole idea that somebody can go back 8 years in somebody's Twitter feed and be like, what about this? He continues. And nobody says, you had to go back 8 years to find something? Sounds like this is a pretty good person if you had to go back 8 years. Meanwhile, there are a bunch of people who get paroled from prison every day who have done so much worse and they're allowed to put their lives back together. You can have 20-year wars. You can create synthetic heroin. You can poison the food supply. You can do all of that and it's barely going to read. They did a study the other day that 85% of people have plastic in their body. That's horrifying. Who's going to be held accountable for that? Nobody. But I could tell you 5 different topics that if I did a joke about, I would get in more trouble than the people who caused that.
So I get it.
Ignoring his particular take on the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And I know what he means.
I get what he's saying, especially like in a country where we theoretically have free speech.
Mm-hmm.
I get it.
I get it.
Hate speech is different.
Hate speech is a thing.
But we're not a political podcast.
No, not this episode, but we're getting close. But
the all-new virtual cocktail politics cast.
Virtual cocktail 2024.
Polycast.
I know what he means, and like in general, it's easier to gain momentum of anger on someone, on like an individual, than like the faceless identity of a corporation.
Yeah.
And I know that's what he's talking about. That's also not how parole works.
No.
in general. But I know what he means, and I get it.
Yeah.
I wish this movie was as nuanced as that quote.
Yeah.
Anyway, reviews both positive and negative kept saying this movie was a movie version of Bill Burr's stand-up routine. Like we mentioned before, there is also a direct reference to one of his bits about how Steve Jobs must have been doing pretentious stuff at Apple office all the time, just like eating pears. And then you see Aspen doing the pitch, and he's specifically eating a pear. And then his Bill Burr's wife, Nia Renee Hill, plays the nurse in the maternity ward.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah,
that's a nice little cameo.
Yeah, fun for the whole family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into our ratings for this movie.
Let's surprise everyone with what our rating is.
Yeah. So our rating system is a 4-star rating system with 5 options. A 0 out of 4 is, oh no, stop, you guys, stop making movies. And 1 out of 4 is it was a movie. 2 out of 4 is it's well made. 3 out of 4 is it's enjoyable and kind of technically good. 4 is Oscar worthy, and like I gave it a 4 out of 4. No, I'm honestly not sure.
I might change mine. I'm at a 1 right now, and I know that we said, like, let's not get too in-depth in this. I could really go in-depth in this, but also I straight up don't care about anything that this movie is presenting.
The problem is that, like I said, there is 10 minutes of a good movie in this movie, which is why I think I'm going to stick with 1. Mm-hmm. And I know Bill Burr is talented. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to tell him stop making movies.
Right.
I just think he needs to find the nuance and get away from raunchy comedy in terms of movies.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to stick with a 1. This has been my least favorite movie that we've seen this year, I think. And there is even a movie that I've given a 0 that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah.
And I still think I like this one less, but I think I'm still giving this a 1 because I think Bill Burr can do better.
I think he can do better. It's just...
Maybe he needs someone who writes movies.
Yeah, this really, like... The plot isn't a plot, it's a series of scenes strung together, and it feels like one of those conversations you have with your buddy, and you're like, oh, what if there's a movie where, like, this happened, and then this happened,
There's
and then
a strip club.
Yeah, and then they made that movie.
It is also always weird to me when someone who made the movie writes themselves into a strip club scene.
Yeah. He does interact the least.
It's true, he does.
In the strip club. Because he's giving a monologue about his wife, and then like the camera slowly pulls out, and there's like someone trying to give him a lap dance, and he's just like, I don't know, maybe Leah's right. Which visually I liked, but that content wise, bleh.
Yeah.
I might give it a 0.
That's fair.
Just because this could have gone in any direction. It didn't pick any of them.
That's fair.
And it's very obvious that there are like 3 different plots you could have made in this movie, or like 3 different movies you could have made, all from this central concept of like an older dad. It could have gone on a buddy road trip of them like trying to find this influencer so that they can save the company. It could have been them like on a deeper level of like, my wife and I are both in our 40s or 50s and trying to figure out how to raise a kid in this environment. It could have been like this same like kind of jokey guy version, but then you see him experience therapy and like some sort of like beneath the surface level emotion, and it just I feel like it actively chooses to not do any of those.
That's fair.
And technically wise, There's nothing about like cinematography or score or anything.
No, you're right. And actually, the first thing that I really noticed was that it began with
the voice, like record scratch freeze frame. You must be wondering how I got in this situation.
Well, no, the first shots, and it was probably helicopter, but the first shots were very drone-like.
Oh yeah.
And I have a problem when there's an unnecessary drone shot in any movie or any short film. Like, it just takes me out of it because I can tell it's a drone or something like it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's true. Nothing. There's just like, I think 2.5 good scenes in this movie, I think, and that's, I don't know.
What I like is I like the feeling of seeing a character actor and being like, oh, I recognize you. Like, good for you, you're doing stuff. So I liked seeing all of those people. I liked specific line deliveries, but I did not like the context of the entire scene that they were in. And I also like Miles Robbins, who I know we've mentioned before. He's the guy that I always forget that his name is Miles Robbins, because I think he's like the third Sprouse brother. He looks like that to me. His parents are Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon, so like he is a Nepo baby, but I like him because he always shows up in goofy stuff.
I think for me, a 0 out of 4 movie just has to be a movie where there's absolutely no scene that I like. And unfortunately, there were a couple scenes that I liked.
That's why I'm like, it's either like a strong 0 or a weak 1.
Yeah.
Which maybe we should be doing halves.
No.
I know, like.
I think I'll leave my 1.
And then it averages out to
Half.
0.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's stop talking about that movie.
Great.
And at the end, we always talk about a different movie that we've watched recently. I haven't watched movies recently in the past couple of weeks, at least, because I've been very busy
and sick.
Yeah.
I watched The Birdcage kind of recently.
That's a good one.
Don't think I mentioned that before.
I don't think so.
I think it's one of those movies that like there are some scenes in it where it's like, I don't know if you could like make that exactly the same now, where like maybe it's running a little against PC-ness of just various terms and stuff, but I also don't care because it's like it's one of those movies that's like if it's by gay people enough and for gay people that it's like just go for it. Like, and also Robin Williams.
We'll see how PC Dix the Musical is.
Yeah, that's another one we're gonna have to talk about this year. Yeah, but I enjoyed it. I had never watched it before until a couple weeks ago, and it's like it definitely holds up well. I think the plot is very interesting, and there's enough of like an interesting parent dynamic in that movie that is just fun to see it play out, and it plays out like it hits all of the emotional beats that you want it to, where I was like, it surprised me a little bit at how genuine like this father and son dynamic was. So I enjoy it.
No, I think it's
there's
a good movie.
You know, some stuff that would probably be changed if / when they make a remake of it.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hate ranting about a movie that's about ranting.
He has a whole rant about how his rants aren't rants. That
I wouldn't watch this movie.
Yeah. I wouldn't, but we did.
Yeah. We did this for you.
Yeah.
Okay? We didn't want to, but we did it.
We
love you.
When you were like, I need to figure out a time to watch Old Dads, and I was like, I can't watch it again. I really like I wanted to want to watch it again. Yeah. And I just can't. I can't do the secondhand embarrassment thing. And the entire time it's like I can't. It just hurts to watch.
I want Bill to make a good movie.
Yeah,
I think he has it in him.
I'm rooting for him.
We're rooting for you, Bill.
We're rooting for you to not do this again.
But for now, go ahead and follow us on Instagram, support us on Patreon, leave comments and questions, and we'll respond to them on our other podcast, Virtual House Sessions. But for now, we will see you next week.
Goodbye.